here we are back at the Arthritis Broadcast Network. My name is Kelly English, and I'm from the Arthritis Research Canada's Patient Advisory Board in Vancouver, BC. Today I'm talking to Dr. Sasha Bernatsky. Have I pronounced that right?
Absolutely.
Check to begin with. Senior Scientist, Infectious Disease and Immunity in Global Health Program, Center for Outcome Research and Evaluation, and Professor of Medicine in McGill University. Welcome.
Thank you.
I was reading a bit before I started interviewing you. I'm surprised you've got time to talk to us.
Oh, absolutely.
So
like I said, this is a priority. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you guys and support your work in getting the message out to the
Perfect.
community.
I know that we have a lot of patients that are quite interested in this topic. So, first tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into this field.
Well, in general, as a rheumatologist, I was interested in the clinical investigation side of things very early on, and I was given some opportunities, first in the context of a clinical trial called SMILE, which was led by Paul Fortin, who's has won the Senior Investigator Award this year. So that was actually my first exposure when I was a rheumatology trainee to a clinical trial that was investigator-driven. And he was asking a question that was really important for patients and people who take care of rheumatology patients, particularly lupus. And I use the results from that study every single day. So, whereas before there wasn't a lot of use of methotrexate in lupus, we're using it in the indications that it works. And so that was my first exposure. From there, I went to do training with Anne Clark in Montreal.
In Montreal, yes.
Yeah, I stayed. I'm from Western Canada, but
you
stayed in Montreal. Yeah, that's right. So, but McGill's a great place, and there's a wonderful research community there, including some people who are really interested in pragmatic trials. So this year, I've been collaborating with investigator Robin Tamlin, who's setting up a platform that could support more pragmatic trials at McGill, because I think all across Canada, there's more we could do for pragmatic trials. So we're just... Mm-hmm.
Sorry, for our listeners, what do you mean by pragmatic trials?
So I was, I think one of the reasons why you wanted me to talk today was to tell you about the Pragmatic Trials workshop that Glen Hazlewood and I are organizing. So today Glen will be telling everybody about an introduction to pragmatic clinical trials. And the answer, what is a pragmatic trial, is on one level it's very simple, and on a deeper level it's a little more complicated, complicated like anything in life. So a pragmatic trial is a clinical trial that tells us about what's going on in the real world. It happens in the real world. So when I think of a randomized controlled trial, an RCT, the first thing that pops in my head is one of those huge multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical trials where you have people who are enrolled with strict criteria, strict follow-up. And while that can tell you, for example, about a drug's efficacy, it doesn't necessarily tell you what happens in the real world. Because, for example, they might exclude patients who are seniors or have comorbid conditions. And in the real world, that's what we have to deal with. So pragmatic trials were meant to be a way where you could still use some of the concepts of an RCT. So, for example, randomization and good clinical trial principles, but in a setting where there's less stringency, for example, in the inclusion criteria.
So it's a real world.
Well, real world.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. So the trial that you're working on, you'll be presenting that today?
So in fact, what it is a workshop that will bring together those that are interested. So we have people from, when we developed the workshop idea, we were thinking about clinical investigators, but there will be some trainees and maybe some patient representatives and other people, because it's a broad topic.
Right.
And so Glen's going to present the principles of a pragmatic trial, and then we're going to brainstorm a little bit about what we as a Canadian rheumatology community need in terms of upping our game for pragmatic trials in rheumatology in Canada. So Glen and I are proposing, and I would say that Glen is the primary lead here, but I'm so glad to be a small part of this. So then the idea is to establish a bit of a network, to bring people together. I think in Canada we're fortunate that we have a fairly close-knit rheumatology community, but it's a growing community, and so we think this is a way for maybe people to bring ideas together, for us to network, stay in touch, and maybe start building some capacity.
Great, that makes sense. And can you tell us more about CANAIM and the Drug Safety Efficacy Network as well?
Yeah, so there are other things various things that I do, and one of them is leading the CANAIM team. So the Drug Safety and Effectiveness Network is an entity that brings together Health Canada and other regulators from the provinces and various levels, and Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or CIHR, which is our federal funding agency for research. So the concept was to bring the regulators, people who needed information, together and link them with researchers or research groups. So we have different research teams, and CANAIM is one of them. And CANAIM is serving the role of trying to identify and create opportunities for research using what we call clinical cohorts. So there's lots of ways to do research, but our approach is to be aware of the opportunities that we have at hand to use research cohorts. So as you may know, in Canada we have some wonderful research cohorts, especially in rheumatology.
We do.
So our first CANAIM project was in rheumatology, and we have ongoing right now a biosimilars registry. So this is a really key project, I think, bringing together both the inflammatory bowel disease and the rheumatic disease community. So all the indications in those two groups and beyond where biologics are used.
Right.
And so the Public Health Agency, the Health Canada's Marketed Health Products Directorate and other divisions are always in need of more information about therapies, particularly when there are therapies that are may have potential side effects. So this biosimilars registry is actually enrolling people who are both on biosimilars and the originator drugs, and comparing outcomes. So it's across Canada. It's a 5-year project. We'll be enrolling people for the next year and a bit, and then doing follow-up so that everybody has at least 2 years of follow-up.
Okay.
So things like how long people stay on a drug, is it different if you're taking a biosimilar versus a biooriginator, and other important patient-centered outcomes.
I noticed that biosimilars were, there's a big announcement today in Ontario on biosimilars.
So it's a hot topic, no matter where you go.
That's right.
In Canada and outside Canada.
That's right. So what's the most exciting thing that you think has happened this year and is happening this year in CRA?
Well, last night there was a presentation on the microbiome, so I mean that's definitely been a hot topic for a while. And one thing that I think is exciting about that is it helps us, presents us with a new opportunity to think about health and disease, and how badly we need to personalize care, and how badly we need to think of the whole person, including their diet.
Right.
And it's really interesting, although unfortunately I think we don't have a great handle on what interventions are the best ones for each individual patient when it comes to diet. At least we're starting to understand that it's valid for a patient to be asking, what should I do about my diet? And for us to be a little aware about, what are the healthiest choices for somebody who's trying to be their best self, living with arthritis.
I find it's a really big topic, big topic. And every time one of these diet cure for rheumatoid arthritis or whatever comes out, there's more and more questions. Or someone will say, I'm better if I don't have starch in my diet, or the next person will say, well, I'm better if I don't have milk in my diet, or whatever. So I think you're right that maybe we'll be able to answer some of those questions in the future.
Well, that would be great. I do think that it's always individualized. So I say to the patient, well, if you feel better on a gluten-free diet or whatever, pay attention to that. And so there's also, I mean, I do try to, tell them what I know from the literature. They may be interested, for example, in knowing that in lupus there was a trial that looked at flaxseed. They may ask about fish oils because that's kind of been a topic of interest.
Yeah.
And so what I try to help the patient understand when I'm talking to them about diet is like a healthy diet. That's the key thing. So what links things like fish or flaxseed is those healthy omegas, So
That's right.
Kind of focusing on that helps a lot. The other thing that I've found is one thing is controlling the rheumatoid arthritis or the lupus or whatever you have, but sometimes people have other things going on like irritable bowel syndrome.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so there are sometimes dietary things that they can think of, but that's not necessarily just for their arthritis. It's kind of
the whole body. That's
right.
exactly right. And hot topic. Can I go off my medication if I try such and such a diet, or is this something you recommend? And I get this all the time. Well, I don't want to take medication. I'm newly diagnosed. I'm going to just try diet instead. Are there any advantages or disadvantages to doing that? I really put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is, I'm rheumatologist,
and I'm sure you've heard that one before.
Well, the interesting thing is maybe we haven't heard it as much as it's on the minds of patients, because unfortunately, we don't always hear when a patient is taking their medication or not. And so I think I mentioned that in the past, sometimes I've been seeing people periodically, how you doing? These are your medications. And then one day they say, oh, those medications that I told you I've been taking for the past 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, I haven't actually been taking them. Nowadays, we have a few more ways of verifying people are actually refilling their prescriptions and not, but obviously we need to have these conversations. We can't just say to the patient, you have to take your drugs and
it goes two ways.
Well,
the patients have to tell you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And ask you.
Right, but this is, one of the themes globally is personalized medicine, right? And perhaps individualizing the discussion as well as the ultimate decisions.
That's right. And I ask that because having been 20 years on the internet with over 1,000 people, it's always the first thing. I don't want to take medication first, so I'm going to try my diet first. Right. And I don't think I think it's complementary.
For sure, both hand in hand.
Exactly.
Ideally.
Exactly. Do you have any questions from the audience, Anita?
Do you have any tips for patients on how to achieve a low-cost, healthy diet?
That's a really good question. One of the things that grieves me is I think you do need money sometimes to buy, for example, organic, if you're looking for organic food. Now, so tips on how to have a low-cost, healthy diet. I think it's kind of different levels. In fact, we're aware that the prepared products like a can of soup versus just making your own soup from scratch is going to be cheaper in the long run to make things from scratch. So making things from scratch probably is the healthiest way to have is probably the healthiest cost-efficient way to take charge of your health. The problem is you have to have the time to do that. So maybe that means you change how you eat, but definitely try to get away from the processed foods. So somebody said once, oh, you should try to make your groceries be ones that don't have a barcode on it. So load up with like fruits and vegetables and things that haven't been processed. So that's one thing. That way maybe you'll be able to get in more of the fruits and vegetables, which can be a little bit more costly. Of course, always buying things in season, buying local can help out as well. And then it's interesting because, of course, there's been some movement towards recommendations for a healthy diet away from meat and more towards, maybe you will only have meat once a month, but you'll be having fish or chicken, or say fish, a couple times a week, and then meat alternatives. So I mean, eggs, cheese, nuts, legumes. Those tend to be less expensive, and they're good sources of what we need to keep.
And a lot less sodium too, which of course
processed stuff has a lot of sodium, which many of us have to watch as well.
That's right. That's right. Anything else, Nita? Thank you so much for visiting us.
Thank you.
We always get a lot from your talks,
It's
and
wonderful.
we know our patients too.
Thank you.
Thank you.